All right. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you attending. We're going to go ahead and get started. So in today's session, today is all about just kind of giving you updates on what's we're working on behind the scenes with Capstone. So Chris has some things to talk about. I've got some things to talk about. We have Morgan here who's going to be giving a demo of some of the work that's been done. And, by the end of today's session, hopefully you have a better picture about, what we're doing to help support students and what kind of cool things we're working on behind the scenes. So just want to kind of give some brief introductions. Hopefully you all know Chris. Chris is founder of Launch School, has been doing this for, I think, about a decade now in the current Launch School iteration, and is doing things all across the board on Launch School. My name is Nick. I work specifically on Capstone. So once you hit Capstone, if you decide to apply for the program, you're going to see a lot of me and a lot of Max too. Max is my counterpart in kind of running and administering the Capstone program. So just to give you a quick overview, Chris is going to talk about one of the cool new features that we've been working on behind the scenes called LSBot, as well as some of the new AI curriculum that we're developing for the Capstone program. And then I'll talk with you all about some of the updates to the open source initiative that we've been running pretty much since close to the beginning of this year. And Morgan's going to give us a demo of some of that open source work that she's been working on. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the internship and employer pipeline opportunities that we've been kind of chipping away on, and then we'll have a Q&A and answer everyone's question. If you do have questions, I encourage you to use the question and answer functionality in Zoom. You should see it in kind of the toolbar at the bottom. If they're both in the question and answer and chat, it's just a little bit harder to track. So go ahead and use the Q&A function, and we'll get to your questions when we get to that part. All right, Chris, I'm gonna hand it off to you.
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about the Ellis bot first, but just to set the stage a little bit is that we're doing a lot of things in Capstone, and largely two major categories. One is sort of like AI space, and the other one is more initiative based, like the open source initiative and working with employers and things like that. So, and within the AI space, there's two more sort of like categories. One is building out feature set that will benefit our student body, which is the LS bot. And then the second thing is turning around, taking everything we've learned and building curriculum out of it. So I'll talk about both of those things. First, LS bot, we've been testing this for a while. And some of the defining characteristics is that it is curriculum aware. So unlike ChatGPT or Claude or just sort of generic AI tools that you would use on your own, LSBot actually uses those foundational models, but is curriculum aware and context aware. And so context aware means that it's aware of where you are in the course. It's aware of Launch School resources and documents, such as like Reddit posts even and forums in our community forums and things like that. And we're constantly updating this. So it's able to answer within that context of where you're at and bounded by the Launch School curriculum. So an example would be like if you're in a course 101 and you ask a OO question, if you ask ChatGPT this, it will gladly answer your question and you can keep chasing down rabbit holes. Whereas if you ask like a TA at Launch School, a human TA, they might say, hey, don't worry about that yet. Set that aside. We got you covered in a later course. For now, focus on, doing it this way. And so as a student, you're going through a curriculum, that's what you sign up for, right? Sort of that curation through a certain path, as opposed to like, I could just chase down every, knowledge, curiosity that I have. So our LS bot is sort of fits our curriculum, fits your progression. It's completely built in-house, so we didn't, go buy any products or anything like that. It's a custom, what we call RAG architecture. This is a predominant AI architecture of today, plus some ingestion pipelines that we're constantly experimenting with. Lots of features forthcoming. The only thing I can say is that it's been really, really good so far. Um, we redacted the the comparison here. Not really a competitor, but a comparison. And so far, we're really happy with the results and how people are using it. Um, Next slide. So I think the bot really unlocks a lot of the educational user experiences that are just not possible before. So asking questions until you get to clarity, just keep going on. And I think we all had this experience in class where no matter how small the class is, whether it's 10 people, 5 people, 20 people, um, you stop after a while because you're like, I don't want to hold up the class with my never-ending list of questions, right? Obviously, instructors and teachers, as gracious as they can, they're not going to be around 24/7. If you're studying late at night, you're not going to be able to just pop in and say, "Hey, I have this question. How do I get unstuck here?" Or like here, if you're around the world, if you're in a time zone where we don't have a lot of staff, then you're going to have to wait a little bit of time to get your questions answered. And then exercises, it can generate exercises. So might be something that you would want like a human teacher to do for you, right? Give me some exercises now to practice, right? That's scope to this content. Underneath that, I wrote some cons to that as well, right? So if you can ask questions um, infinitely, you have something with infinite patience. I mean, there's also the possibility of infinite rabbit holes. 24/7 availability. Um, you know, One thing I've learned about launch school and teaching people is that learning is just not natural. It's not a thing that people want to do. It's like eating vegetables, right? Until you develop a habit. I think most people are not really, really in like they don't have the habit of learning yet, and motivation often comes from that community. So community is human community usually, right? So having a bot that's 24/7, that's why we also named it LS bot instead of giving it a human name, is that we want you to know it's a bot, right? We want you to know that there's limitations to the bot too. And then exercises are only good if it's scoped appropriately. If you ever follow some random tutorial online, sometimes you just hit an exercise you can't do and you don't know if you can do it. So within Launch School, if you're in a course and we put an exercise in front of you and it's difficult, that probably means you can keep chewing on it and because you have the ability and knowledge to get through it, probably. But in general, if we can mitigate some of these cons, which is what we're working on, right? We're mitigating some of these cons. I think the pros really, really unlock a learning experience that's just not possible previously to this. Next slide. So we've been private beta testing it for a while now, for several months. It's currently in production, available in the live series, which is Prep and Core Live. That's the technical courses, and then Smooth Start, which is the non-technical courses. These run about a month long. And so far, the feedback has been really stellar. So real little blog post there to announce it and capture a lot of the quotes. You can read that if you like. Next slide. So I just want to show a demo real quick. I'm not going to actually type because that'll take too long. It's actually pretty quick, but I think you have to stop sharing, Nick, maybe. Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up.
There you go.
I'm going to share how students have currently used it. So here, Denba is asking a question about this is the JavaScript Core Live group. So just a question about block variable scope. And so there's a little back and forth. And so he follows up, I think I got it, right? Here's my understanding. Is that right? And then the bot reinforces that understanding and says, got it. And then what's cool is like if someone else is watching this, like, oh yeah, this is a really good discussion. That's really helpful. Um, and they chime in, right? So here's another one about where Yulia is asking, what do I need to know about variables as pointers? This concept of variables pointer. So kind of LSBot gives a summary answer here. And these summary answers are contained within the content of Launch School. So there's a constraining factor here that is really important because if you ask out in the wild, It could very use they could use words and vocabulary that we don't talk about in law school that you haven't studied, right? So this LSBot as a refining knowledge, as a tool to refine knowledge is really powerful. Because sometimes like I don't want to bother a TA with this question. And also, once they give me a couple answers, I'm probably gonna leave them blown. I don't want to keep pinging Nick at 2 a.m. But with LSBot, you don't have that reservation as much. So Yula keeps going. Give me some examples. And here's an example. And the turnaround time is pretty quick. If you look at it's 8:33, she asked the question, the bot turned it around, within a minute. So it's pretty quick. Um, and so she keeps going. What operations mutate the object, right? And so gladly it's answered. Again, just within that 1 minute. Could you please explain what it means? So you can tell, like based on the time, she takes a few minutes to study the answer, and then has a follow-up question, a follow-up thought, and you can just like keep chasing down these loose ends of questions and thoughts with LSBot, and I think that's super powerful. So she keeps going. Can you clarify what this means in your answer? And it's like, yeah, sure. Let me clarify for you. Um, and this whole thread just keeps going. But again, if you look at the examples and how they're kind of ping-ponging back and forth, it's all confined within the one-on-one course, which is what I find really, really interesting and useful here for our purposes. Um, and then somebody else is like watching this and finds it useful and has a follow-up question for LSBot. And then Ivan jumps in here too. And now they've switched to like, okay, I sort of understand the explanation. Um, Generate some questions for me, right? Like to test my knowledge a little bit. And so it does. This one on the right panel here is again aware of our books. So can you like look at this page and then just summarize it for me real quick? Alex didn't continue on, but if you say, hey, this is too many bullets, can you summarize it even more? It would be able to do that. So as a summarization task, I think it's really good. I think this type of thing is really good before or after studying. So before studying, give me a quick high-level overview. Like one study tactic that I notice in a lot of good students is that they will go through a course super fast just to get a overview of the course, and then they'll go back with a fine-tooth comb and really study each assignment, right? And so this could be that like overview without having to click through all the assignments. Conversely, a lot of people go through a course and then take notes and study. And so this could be good after as well. So pre or post studying as a reference, I think this tool is really, really good. Um, so this one, I wanted to demo to show that you can use it to even do language checks. So this is like, I'm getting ready for an interview. I just want to make sure my language is precise enough. We get a lot of this type of request. And we had to say RTA, our staff will no longer do sort of language precision checks, because what was happening is if one of our TAs says something not precise, they would then take it on assessment and then say, hey, look, I was told this by our TA. All right. So we're like, okay, we can't do that anymore. That's basically grading assessment before the assessment for our staff. But where the LSBot can plug in this gap here, I think is really, really good. Just because we know it's a bot, we know that it can hallucinate and not be precise, but despite all that, it can still be a very, very useful tool. And just see how Ivan kind of keeps probing, keeps probing. And by the way, as I click through here, you'll see like very similar names like Ivan, Yulia keep using it. And the reason is because I think they figure out how to use it, right? So some people use it, they use it once, they get an answer, it's cool, or they get an answer, it's not cool, they'll just leave it. I think what Ivan, Yulia, Sophia, and some of these folks who've been using it a lot is that they finally figure out how to use LSBot in a way to keep probing and refining their knowledge without reliance on it in terms of like, this is like a human TA and this is what's on the test, right? It's not a question of tell me what's on the test. It's a question of how do I refine my understanding against this content. And so you see the way Ivan's using it is a little different. That's like, here's an example. I'm going to explain it to you. you evaluate my explanation. Right? So he keeps doing this and it's really, really cool. And then I follow up with, hey, was it helpful? And he's like, absolutely, right? Is super helpful. And he just keeps going. Here Yuli is just using it to generate exercises. Oops, that refresh. Give me a code snippet. Okay, yeah. So using it to generate exercise. Well, that was a different one, but this is a very similar one. She's using it here to generate exercises again. In terms of scoping it to like Boolean operators, flow control, short circuit. It gave her one. I think she laughed because she's like, this is probably maybe too complex. She literally just gave it the same prompt again, and it just generated different exercises for her. So she just keeps doing this, generating exercises. And then finally she noticed, she's like, oh, okay, like I noticed empty string evaluated to falsy. Is that, is that correct? Is something, did I do something wrong? And the bot's able to say, yeah, it is, right? So it kind of keeps going there. And then you can keep refining the request for generating exercises. Um, This one is about this one's like a little bit more theory, programming theory. How do I know what data structure to choose and what are the criteria when I evaluate a data structure? And this is very early on in 101. I think we talk about some basic data structures like arrays versus hash and which one to choose when. So it kind of gives you some high level topics here. Um, this one we already covered. This one I want to this one I want to show you, but it refreshed. I think I pulled up where Julia was using it to generate a bunch of exercises, and then she wanted to be tricky, and then I chimed in and I said, LSBot, make it trickier, right? And then it produced like another 10 that's slightly trickier. And then she chimed in, she's like, make it even trickier. And then, so like we keep pushing it and just telling it to make it trickier and trickier. And then it got too tricky. And we're like, oh, okay, make it less tricky. And it literally generated like 50 exercises within a span of like 10 minutes. Eventually we calibrated to sort of exactly the right level of trickiness that we were looking for. And that was really cool just to be able to have it generate 10 or so exercises to push on a specific knowledge that you were trying to test. So all these different use cases we're seeing, we're going to explore more for sure. And so that's what we're doing for LSBot. We are working really hard behind the scenes to make it available more. I know I'm showing this to people and half of you are like, I'm beyond 101 now. So what can I do with it? We're working on it. But yeah, and always happy to answer questions about it or field requirements and things like that. We're definitely in exploration mode with LSBot. Really, really exciting and super excited about it. So that leads to sort of the second part of this, what I had to talk about, which is the AI curriculum. And so the way I think about what's happening right now is that a new primitive just dropped. New primitive, I mean like, primitives in software is like, database, right? A web server. These are Lego blocks that we use to build our applications. Well, a new one arrived, and it's introduced a lot of other like associated primitives like vector databases, embedding models, new types of architectures like RAG architecture. And so there's different layers of here how we want to use these primitives, right? Like a database. How do we use a database? We can use it for anything we want. So it has the capabilities of a database has impact to all the layers above it, right? From what are the best practices to using a database? What are the UX that gets unlocked from a database? Well, now imagine a new primitive coming up. We're obviously trying to figure out the best practices. We're obviously trying to figure out the UX, but also this primitive is not staying put. It is expanding in capability in a variety of different directions. So all layers are in flux. This is unlike many of the things that, or all the things that we cover in the core curriculum. It's not in flux that much, right? Ruby, JavaScript, Python, these languages are evolving, but imagine if Python all of a sudden, turned functional or something like that. It would just like completely change the way we use it. So LLMs are still in flux. And so it's really hard to know what best practices are. Like mastery is not possible at the moment because we don't know what to master. You spend a year mastering something at this moment related to LLMs, it could be useless in a few months. So the goal of the curriculum is actually to share what we know as we build the LS bot. So LSBot is great because we have a definite use case. We have a student body. We have a curriculum. We know who we're building for, and we know what we want to achieve with it. There are real requirements. There are real users. It's not sort of like a fabricated thing, what if thing. Um, and we also know from talking to others and network and all that, we know that what we're doing with LSBot is basically at the boundary of current day best practices. And so the goal of the curriculum is to just take all of that, everything we're learning, and to turn it around and to teach it and to share it. Next slide. So this little diagram I took from the latent space blog post on what an AI engineer is, but PhD is not required here, right? It's an actually absolutely amazing time to be a really good software engineer who can build, who know what they're doing. Um, and you might need a PhD if you want to be an ML researcher, right? Up to the left side of this graph. But the more you move to the right, the less you need to know about the PhD level math required for ML, right? So AI engineering is definitely a new discipline that's kind of popped up around this, what I call the new primitive. Um, Yeah, next slide. I think this is my last slide. And so people are like, well, what is it working on? Just calling the OpenAI API, right? And that's all you're doing. This is just one diagram that I pulled. There's a lot of surrounding work related to that. So this is what's called the retrieval part of the RAG architecture. And I won't go through this, but there's just a lot of moving parts. And like I said, sort of peripheral primitives that popped up. It's not just the LLM. In fact, you see the LLM there, just one box at the bottom. What about the rest? Yeah, and you have to orchestrate all these things together to get the result that you want, right? And we're doing this for LSBot. There's a lot more to this, so it's not just about calling the OpenAI API, although it is one of the many things you have to do, and especially if you want to make things that are production ready. So we're excited to do that. We're going to add AI curriculum to Capstone starting in the January cohort, which is the next cohort. And if anything stabilizes to the point where we can feel like it's mastery based and it's for sure valid for the next, let's say 5 years, we'll drop it in core, right? But right now everything's in flux, and so that's where Capstone is. Capstone is our adapter from master-based foundations to the market, and that's why it's in Capstone.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. If anyone has any questions about LSBot, about the, AI in general, or about the new AI curriculum, feel free and drop those in the Q&A function, and we'll tackle those when we get to the Q&A part of the program here. So I want to switch gears a little bit and give you an update on a few of the things that we're working on to support our students who have completed Capstone and are job hunting for their first post-Capstone software engineering role. I've mentioned our open source initiative a few times over the past year, but I want to kind of give you an update at where we're at with this and kind of the effect that it's having. We started working on this in February this year with just a handful of students working together with alumni that are working at Mozilla, who maintains the Firefox browser, and at ZenML, which is an open source machine learning framework. And we've been continuing to iterate and refine this program to the point where now 30 students have gone through it with another 4 currently in progress. We've actually added a new company, Netlify, where our 4 current students are working with a staff software engineer over there on kind of issues and features for their Netlify command line tool, which is one of their open source repos that they maintain. And the program itself is structured around cohorts of 4 to 8 students on the job hunt that are mentored by us. They're mentored as a small group by a Capstone alumni currently working at one of these companies. And the students, the way that it works from a timeline perspective is they take a week and they work asynchronously, getting their environment set up, learning about the company and their products, pulling down the code and figuring out how it works. And after that week of setup, then the students will start the actual work in pairs, usually supported by the mentor. And the mentor does a few things here. On the technical side, one of their biggest value adds is they kind of they create and they curate a list of projects and a list of features or issues for the students to work on that is scoped appropriately um, for the not only the time that they have, but like the skill level of the students. Um, and this is a really big value add because a lot of the work that needs to be done for these open source repositories can really vary widely in terms of complexity, in terms of time that would take, in terms of the skill note level of the engineer that would need to tackle them. So the mentor can kind of help the students get the most bang for their buck in terms of time by having this list of work to complete kind of ready to go. They also do code reviews for the code that the students end up writing, and they also help students get unblocked, right? If they get stuck or they run into technical issues. But the mentors, they actually do several things on the non-technical front as well by helping the students learn how to interact with the open source community, um, doing things like guiding them on how to construct a good pull request, teaching them best practices for contributing to that particular code base, because different code bases have different contribution guidelines. And they can also act as a liaison internally in the company and reach out to somebody else, right? If they need to be pulled in or help expedite getting code merged in. So we have a few goals for students for this open source initiative. First and foremost, we want them to get experience working on a code base in production. This is, I would say, the most common thing that employers look for on the job hunt. And it's something that we just simply have to say no to after Capstone because as technically impressive as the Capstone projects are, they aren't production applications, right? Like students aren't maintaining live systems that have large amounts of real users who interact and rely on that code or on that application. Students, they design the Capstone projects with these characteristics in mind, with those requirements in mind, but they don't spend time maintaining the projects beyond the job hunt because the whole purpose of the Capstone project is a showcase of knowledge and skills and to help students get their first software engineering role post Capstone. So this initiative gives Capstone grads the experience working on an actual production code base that's live to users, and they can put that experience on their resume. And this is particularly helpful for students whose resumes need a little bolstering, like maybe they don't have prior work experience showcasing that they work on well on teams. They don't have maybe a college degree that many companies look for. So this can be a way to give those students a leg up on the job hunt. And the work that the students do also makes for great conversation topics in interviews, right? Like if you're going into an interview for a software engineering role, you'll often get questions like, what have you been working on lately, right? What's a large code base that you've worked on? And this open source initiative experience can help provide some go-to answers and spark some really positive conversations. So the program itself is offered after the 16-week capstone program sometime during the job hunt. We just kind of have rolling cohorts and so we offer this relatively frequently during the job hunt based on the mentor's availability. And the students put their job hunt on hold for the 4-week mentoring portion and work on this full time. So they can increase the chances of coming out of this with something really impressive, right? So I want to just talk briefly about some of the projects that have come out of this. Here are two that have been built recently. One of them is a feature that uses dev containers to kind of create a new onboarding experience for ZenML. Because one of the hard things that folks starting to use tools like ZenML face is setting up the right environment, right? And so to make that process smoother, the participants in this open source initiative created this sandbox development environment using GitHub code spaces that lets users kind of dive right into using ZenML without the hassle of this like environment setup thing. So it spins up this cloud-based environment using specific dev containers that CodeSpaces run, and just generally cuts down the time that you'd need to spend configuring everything manually. So this feature makes it easier for new users to get started and start exploring ZenML, and make something that's as specialized as machine learning just a little bit more user-friendly. This other cool project, the LLM-powered chatbot, this is another cool thing for the VS Code extension that the open source initiative participants built. With the goal here was to provide some quick real-time support directly in VS Code where users are working, so you don't have to context switch over to like a browser and search like for information or help. And this tool is able to also like automatically grab specific context related to ZenML and data about your machine learning pipelines and add it to your query, so you don't have to like go in and manually like copy and paste these things into a query yourself. And further to that, I'd like to invite Morgan to kind of give a demo of what she's been working on, also on the ZenML repository.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, hi everyone. So I, as was said, was part of the ZenML program. I actually was working in concurrency with the people who built the chat bot that Nick just provided. And I built something I, along with a teammate of mine, Alex Sklar, built something in a similar vein. So one of the features that the extension for ZenML offers is the stag visualization tool. This was actually built by another LS grad going through the open source initiative. But these stags are just a data visualization tool that are common inside machine learning as well as out. And in a really simple term, they allow you to see how your code flows through your functions in various architecture. So in this case, all of these ones with the green check marks by them are functions that pass successfully. And then if you have any failure, like this one down here, there is an indicator that something went wrong. And before we started working on this, this was the extent of the functionality for this feature, was you could then click on this and inspect this information that came from the ZenML API and say, okay, well, here's the URL. I can go find this function in my code and see if I can figure out what the problem is from there. What we built was an AI-driven tool to allow you to begin bug fixing this error directly in the extension. So the core of what we built is based around this context menu. So if you right click on any item, you get a couple of options. On most of these items, this is the feature that is already existent. Right clicking and hitting inspect is the same as left clicking. But on a broken item, there are a couple of more options, including one for suggesting a fix. I'm actually going to go to this stack to demonstrate this. So all of this data that I'm working with is just the ZenML quick start. And if we look at the file for that function itself, I've only made a small change, which is calling this example error and passing a num to it. And those are both a function and variable in the global scope. If you look at them, this function just raises an exception if you pass it a 1, and then the num is 1. So really simple error, of course not exactly what you'd see in production code, but for demonstration purposes, will allow us to see what works here. So you can choose a variety of popular LLMs. We're going to stick with ChatGPT here. And if you hit suggest fix, it will take a minute to load because it needs to fetch a bunch of data from ZenML's API and then pass it on to the LLM. It'll also take a little bit longer because I'm also presenting. Okay. And then once that's done, it will pull up a couple of windows. One is a markdown document that opens in preview that shows the plain text response from the LLM. So if you want to inspect the reasoning of the LLM, how it came to its conclusion, that's all presented here for you. And then it will also search your local workspace as well as your Git repo, if it can find one, for the file which includes the code that broke. And then it will directly import its suggestions of how to fix that into the code itself. Some of this will be, a little redundant. You can make quick changes, and if you like a change, this has made some strange suggestions. AIs can be a little bit unpredictable in that way. But if, for instance, you like this change and you save the file, it will save it to your local code base. But one of the core design choices is that no changes should be made without you approving them. So they will only be saved if you manually save it. Autosaves will not overwrite your local code. And there's also an accept change for clarity at the top. And that's the core of the functionality that we built over our month in the open source initiative.
Thanks, Morgan. That's really cool. Yeah, so these are just some of the examples of work that our students do post-capstone during the job hunt if they participate in the open source initiative. And we've heard feedback from a lot of students that this really does make a difference on interviews, not just in terms of helping them get roles, land roles by like presenting this on their resume as a way of kind of highlighting additional work that they've done, but also just in interviews and like being able to talk about these things. Like it's just it sounds really impressive, and it is really impressive, and just being able to walk through some of the technical details, it really lands well. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is a couple of other initiatives. These are a little bit more early days than the open source initiative, but we're starting to work with companies to develop internships and kind of like hiring pipelines with employers. So on the internship side, we have a internship that's on schedule to run towards the end of this year. We're partnering with a consultancy to have a senior engineer directly mentor our job hunters in building out actual software for one of their clients. I'm not in a position to mention names, but because we're still kind of, this is still early days and we're iterating on this experience. But the goals here are similar to the open source initiative, where we want to give students production experience and additional skills that will help them be more attractive and kind of competitive on the job market. And on this employer pipeline side, we've set up pipelines with 2 different companies to get our students into their hiring pipeline much more easily, right? Both of these have been made possible by having Capstone alumni already at these companies and having them perform on such a high level that the company is interested and receptive to coordinating with us to hire more Capstone grads as our cohorts hit the job market. And that kind of wraps up today's presentation. I'd love to open it up for questions. We have a couple here that's open. One is, since LLMs realistically are constantly in an evolving state for the near foreseeable future, any estimates on how long it could possibly be integrated into core?
You mean the LS bot, or the LS bot's already integrated into core, but I'm
guessing maybe learnings,
like
any kind of
curriculum
AI-based
wise?
curriculum.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. We haven't done the capstone yet, so we need to do that first. And iterate there, right? And we've done this. This has been a pattern for us in that we do things in Capstone and then we extract patterns, extract the stable parts, right? The good parts, the stable parts, and then put it in core. For example, we just did this for data structures and algorithms. We just published 2 books and updated our course to just because we know exactly where the parts are non-moving and less in flux, and where the parts that are less effective. I guess for data algorithms, less about less in flux and more like what are the high impact things to know versus the things that rarely come up in job interviews for our graduates, right? So then we take the top 75%, 80% that just is what people run into all the time, and then we can put it in the core curriculum. So we haven't done that yet with the AI stuff. Not only is everything fast moving, is like what knowledge bits are most impactful on the job market. We need data. I think there are a lot of like AI oriented training curriculum out there, they're just winging it. They're just winging it. We're trying to extract curriculum from experience and then use data against the market to determine things, right? As little winging it as possible, I think.
Next question. When you say students do the open source initiative, put their job hunt on hold for 4 weeks, after that, do they get the same level of support in the job hunt as students that didn't do the open source initiative? Yeah, nothing changes. I mean, they do put their job hunt on hold. So the way that that works a little bit more granularly is we just request that students stop dedicating time to what we call outbound activity, which includes like submitting applications, and doing, outreach to folks who might be working at companies with the hope of kind of sourcing referrals. But we don't like withheld any support. In fact, students sometimes still go on interviews or do take-home projects from companies that they have already applied to that just maybe the company took a while to get back to them. And so they'll need to kind of balance their time. But we don't like say, disengage with companies you're talking to because the whole point's to get a job, right? But we still provide these students the same level of support. We're not expecting that they're going to operate with less support. Question, can you talk about what the job hunt looks like day to day? It sounds like it's very much student-led, but I'm wondering if you can talk to what it entails on the support side. For example, I read that you help with salary negotiation. What does that look like? Yeah, I can kind of answer that as well. The job hunt is very much student led. We do have a couple of the first week of the job hunt, we do have some workshops that Max and I run to help get people onboarded onto our, I guess, kind of framework for conducting the job hunt, right? We have a particular structure for how we recommend students pursue the job hunt, right? And those recommendations include things that we've seen students be successful with in various aspects of the job hunt. And we also recommend that folks have a particular, like give examples of schedules that people can set up for themselves. But at the end of the day, the students are responsible for their own job hunt. And so it's up to the student to take what we're providing and be able to incorporate it into what they're doing. We also have job hunt mentors that are online from weeks 5 through 14 of the job hunt that are there to help more one-on-one and small group based support to help folks troubleshoot anything not going well in interviews, to practice with, to get reviews of like how they talk about themselves, how they answer specific questions. Offer advice in terms of best ways to reach out to companies and to people at companies, things like that. For the salary negotiation piece specifically, this has been more prominent in the past when the market was more of a, I don't know if you consider that a buyer's market or a seller's market, but when the market was lean more heavily, like favorably on the job hunter, now it's a lot tighter right now. And so the companies tend to have more of the leverage, more of the power. And so our general advice, I would say for most of the time, is to not negotiate unless you have, specific circumstances. But at the end of the day, if you do decide to negotiate, we do have tips and advice
Depends on
for
when you're
that.
going to be in Capstone, right? And what the
This is
market
true.
is.
Yeah.
So we like our advice will change depending on the market. I mean, there was a time when we're like, basically you should ask for 10 grand more always, at least 10 grand more. There was a time when we were giving that advice. Now it's like, how much leverage do you have? Do you have another offer in hand? That's much better. I mean, it's very situational. So I wouldn't say it's like for sure this or that. But it's very situational. And one of the major situations is the market.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
when you're in Capstone, we'll have to look at everything. What is your profile? What is the market? How many concurrent offers do you have, right? How many colliding offers do you have? All this information feed into. I think the larger question is that you're going to be surrounded by like people. I feel like especially offer time is when everyone gets super excited. So like it's not uncommon for like three people to jump on a call with you simultaneously to talk about stuff like that.
Any updates on the job market for Capstone grads? Is it improving, stagnant, or declining? Chris, do you want to take that one?
Oh, yeah, sure. I can talk about that real quick. So 2023, we reported our numbers. I think it came out to like around 75% at the 6 month mark. 75%. It doesn't mean 75% of people get jobs. People get jobs afterwards. It just means 75% at the 6 month mark. Average salary, base salary, is still pretty high, 116. So for this year, so we had the January cohort. They finished like end of April or early May, something like that. So May to now is not quite. I think the end of this month will be 6 months. So we'll tally numbers then. But I think we might even have to wait like an extra month because people have participated. A large number of people have participated in the in the open source initiative, which takes a month. So the calendar 6 months now, since we're doing this like internship and open source initiative, the calendar 6 months is not 6 months of job hunt because we ask people to stop the job hunt, right? So to get like real 6 month job hunt numbers, we might have to wait till Thanksgiving. But I do expect to hit around that percent again, 75%, 70%, something like that. I think that's gonna because I think we're just under 70% right now for the January cohort. May cohort just started because they finished like end of August. And so they've been job hunting for like a month or two. So we don't have data for that, but January cohort is looking like it's probably going to be similar to 2023 numbers, I think.
Nice. Question from Miguel. One of the slides mentioned that a handful of people get to participate in the open source initiatives. I'm curious, how is it determined who gets to work on these projects if number of seats is less than the number of Capstone job hunters? This is becoming less and less of an issue. Because we've added our third, I guess, company or like pipeline for the open source initiative. The amount of students that we can facilitate and how often we run that means that if somebody wants to participate in them, they'll be able to by and large. They might need to wait one iteration, but they're rarely waiting more than like a month or a month and a half. So this is something that I've been kind of working on is expanding this out so it's not like competitive in the sense of like getting a chance to do it. Like everyone can get a chance. Everyone who wants to can get a chance to do
Yeah,
it.
we're actually getting participant declines, right? In that people don't want to do it because they want to focus on the job hunt. So I think we have more space in the open source initiative than there are people who want to participate. And
Yeah.
going forward, I think that'll be true.
Yeah. Has the focus for Capstone participants shifted away from getting employed at engineering-centric companies and more towards getting any software job that they can given the competitiveness of the market? I would say that has not changed. I would say that we are still targeting engineering-centric companies. And there's a lot of engineering-centric companies out there. It depends on what your definition of any software job is. We don't recommend folks like go find like, an IT admin job. But we do have talked with certain students on looking for software engineering, tangent types of roles. So we've had folks be successful in getting jobs and being successful at jobs as like customer success engineers, support engineers, things like that, that have an engineering component in addition to some other component to the job.
And I think that question is probably not really valid for this market in that the like non-engineering centric jobs they don't exist. They're just not hiring. They're not out there. So in like a very good market for software engineers, there's all kinds of jobs, right? That's where we have the conversation like, hey, why take 2 years to learn when you can get a job in 3 months? Well, you get a better job, right? That was our pitch. In a tighter market, it's no longer why take 2 years to learn instead of 3 months. You can't get a job in 3 months anymore, right? So it's not really a choice anymore.
Let's see here. Are there any new plans for those in between core and capstone? Um,
There's a lot. Something's coming up. I want to announce it next week, I think. As mentioned now, I guess. Um, so we have like curriculum and we have capstone prep and all that. But on top of that, I am in process of organizing I'm not sure what to call it yet, but it's going to be a hackathon-like type of thing, where it'll be a lot of fun. There'll be a little bit of structure. There'll be, seminars that we'll put on, sessions we'll put on. It won't be like Capstone, and it won't be like daily meetings and you're assigned a mentor and all that. It's going to be a little bit more self-driven, but it's going to be a lot of fun and more hackathon oriented. Just because personally for me, I love building stuff. I run launch school, but at the core, I still think of myself as a software engineer who likes to build things. And it's frankly why I entered the field. Why I became a software engineer is not really for a job. I mean, it's good that I could get a job, but it's really just to build stuff. And I want people to feel the joy of building things, not just can I get a paycheck, right? Like you don't need permission to be happy to build stuff. So I want to create something that is along those lines. And so that's coming up. But yeah, we got a lot of plans.
right. Approximately how many hours per week would a student spend on open source initiative? Is there any compensation for the time spent or the work done? Is it realistically possible to participate in OSI and work another job? So open source initiative is just considered a full-time job. It's 40 hours a week. It's not a compensated endeavor. In fact, it costs a small amount of money. Right now it's $300 that we add to the capstone fee to basically pay for the mentor. I mean, all the money for participants who do it gets channeled to the mentor for their time to guide the students. It is not realistically possible to participate and work another job.
By the way,
Both
the
the
point
capstone
is to
and
get a job. If you have a job, you should just do that. Like people are doing this during the job hunt in order to get a job. You know what I mean? So if you have a job, then you're good. You don't need to do this. And I'll just add to this. The way you think about this is like there is a spectrum slider that you get to slide in terms of learning and in terms of work delivery. Like for example, Capstone. We don't pay you to do Capstone, right? In fact, you pay us. In fact, you pay us a lot of money to do Capstone. Why? Because the slider bar is all the way to education. Everything we do within Capstone is optimized for your education. What about work? Work is not optimized for your education. Work is optimized for your work delivery, right? So they pay you. The open source initiative is somewhere in the middle because this is why it takes this partnership. If you just show up and go to an open source project and be like, I'm ready to work, they'll be like, we don't, too many cooks in the kitchen, right? You don't know what you're doing. We don't need you to, it's like walking to a restaurant and be like, I'm ready to cook. It's like, no, we got a thing here. You don't, we don't have time to ramp you up. So the only way this open source initiative and the internship thing, right? The only way these things work at all is that we work a lot behind the scenes to find a mentor so that they carve out work for you, set you up for success, right? It's not you just showing up and start, doing work that you don't know how to do or what to work on, right? So there's a lot of setup, a lot of framing. So a huge part of the open source initiative is actually for your education, right? It's not just about work delivery. It's not, shoveling dirt, just moving boxes. A lot of it, like you saw Morgan's demo, that is mind blowing. That is absolutely ludicrous, right? And so how do you do that in a month? You have to be set up for success. There has to be a lot of work beforehand to say, okay, we got people coming in that with this capability, let's set them up for success. Let's get them finished with this 1 month experience with a great resume entry. And also they do a lot of work for you, right? So this is why it's not like a paid work delivery, like a typical employment. opportunity. Even our internships, some of them pay okay, some of them pay, I wouldn't say market rate at all, right? Why is that? Same reason. It's not 100% work delivery. There's a learning component here for you too. When we talk to employers, we talk to their mentors. This is like, just keep in mind, they're doing this for a month or so, and this is for learning purposes, right? It's not a trial period, right? Think about launch school. When you're studying and you have a question, you can feel free to ask. You should ask. What if you ask during an assessment? We mark you down, right? So there's a time when you are okay to ask and time when you're not. When you're learning, you ask questions. And you hope that you're being set up for success for the work that you're doing. And that's learning. But for work, it's just work delivery. No matter what, you have to bridge the gap. You have to work 80 hours a week if necessary to bridge the gap, right? Or you get fired, right? So it's very, punitive in that way. So anyway, so I think the open source initiative just, sometimes you're like, well, I'm just doing work for free. Like, what's the point? There's a learning component here too.
We got one last question that I think is really cool. I want to ask it here. How are the Capstone grads doing in the ML engineering field? Are there a significant number getting roles related to AI? We have a handful of alum actually working in the ML engineering field, especially the alumni that's serving as the mentor for ZenML. Alex Strick, he's killing it. He's doing a great job over at ZenML. And we have a handful of other alumni from Capstone who are working in that space. And we are seeing more and more folks getting hired at companies whose product has, if not like a sole AI focus, at least a heavy AI focus. And they're doing great too. Like Chris mentioned, there's a very strong software engineer component to a lot of the products, even if they're very AI focused. And so the principles and the learning that you get in Capstone still very much applies.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's an absolutely phenomenal time to be a software engineer. It is. I know there's a lot of doom and gloom for software engineers in general, but just look at the investment, look at the excitement, look at the world-making impact. What industry is doing that? It's not nursing, it's software, right? It's a subset of software, AI engineering, right? I shouldn't have said that. Nurses are great. But you know what I mean. It's not like some random field, right? Um, Software is still super high impact, super high leverage, and I would say a very significant percent of our Capstone grads are working either directly or indirectly with AI. I want to say a very significant percent. So either they're just doing, and if you really look at AI work, the bulk of it is software engineering. Again, new primitives, but you're doing software engineering with new primitives. So it's the same sort of mindset, same sort of ability, and it's where the money is, where the excitement is, and where the impact is.
Right. Well, I think that takes us to the top of the hour. I know we've got like a handful of questions that didn't get asked. That is not because we're not willing to answer them, just from time limitations. So feel free to send a DM to myself or Chris if you want these questions answered, or post them in the Capstone info channel in Slack. Happy to jump in and answer them. But thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you attending. All right. Bye.